in part 2 I cut myself short because I got to 10 minutes and realised I was going on a bit, but I'd not really finished with the torus. So let's go back to the torus and look at cutting it up in a different way and perhaps get on to talking about textures. So what I'm going to do, I am doing this in the main view. I'll loop set and to hardness to hard, and then select the entire object, go to UV mapping, right click, continue by normal projection, and this gives me a normal projection of each of these halves. Now as you can see, there's some distortion on these bits because we're normal to the top, so we're normal on the y-axis. I'll just use the arrow key so we can move this along a bit. So we've projected from above and below. There is a sort of way of fixing this a bit like the relax UVs I've seen in other applications, but I don't know quite how this works. But if I select these middle faces here and go right click and do projection and fold, it actually fixes the scaling a bit. Now I don't really understand how that works, and it'll require some experimentation. It's something I've just recently discovered, but there you go. These are looking more square, which is what you want to reduce the level of distortion. Now supposing I'm going to be naughty and select both these, and then I'm going to scale them max uniform so both halves are overlapping. So essentially this will be one texture for two halves of this torus. And you can see it's quite high resolution. I've made good use of the UV space, but I didn't straighten it out or anything like that. So we'll see how this goes. At this point we haven't got a texture for this face. This is just like a preview mode. But if we go right click, we can create a texture, and you have some options here. So in the background option, well, resolution's fairly easy, you should be able to work that out, but in the background option, if we go to options here, you can have image or color. Now if you have image, you can have this AUVBG, and that's this pattern, which is quite handy for judging the scaling. But for a template, you might want to use color, select color as white, and have draw edges, and just draw the edges. You can draw the edges, or you can draw the faces. So if we do draw faces, you won't see the grid, I don't think anyway. If we draw all the edges, you'll get every edge in this thing. So let's draw the faces, and then you should just end up with a couple of donuts. Okay, so draw faces and go OK, and then we should do this be this one here and this one here that are outlined. It's difficult to see because we've got these over the top. Now bear in mind, you can move these. Oh, we've not got anything there. It's completely blank. Oh, I messed that up somehow. Let's go move those back into place and move to center. Right click, create texture, and draw faces. If we just draw edges, okay, draw the edges and we'll see what we get. Now sometimes this happens and I'm not sure why, but I think it picks up like a transparency map as well, so my shape's gone transparent. If I turn this off now, you can see this is our texture that we've generated from the map that when I created the texture, and that texture is associated with this material. So if I select this material, you can see that that is the case. Right, now what I'm going to do to fix this previewing problem which occurs, and also to show you a feature, if we save this now as a Wings file, well, this is an internal texture, so it'll get picked up, but we can work on this and swap it in and out if we make it external. So if we go right click and select make external, we can just save it to wherever we want. I'm going to save it as a JPEG, and then I can use my paint package, and I'll just pick that out of my folder. I'll just pick it up, okay, and load it in. So I'll just drag and drop it in from over the monitor, and then I can paint this. So I just paint a pattern on this, a very simple pattern that's based on the faces we've got selected. So you'll be able to see in this case which bit is ending up. Whoops, so Control Z, Control Z. I can go back. It's going so well. Okay, that's inevitable, isn't it? Right, I'll go File and Save, and then go back into Wings and go right click and refresh, and there you go, I've brought that in. And any changes, I can just immediately preview them by refreshing it. Now supposing I've done this and I'm thinking, what if I made a bad choice here? Or what I want two separate textures, one for the top half and one for the bottom half. Okay, well, we can do that, because if I take this material and select the material now, you can see it applies to the entire object, but I can duplicate this material. So I've got a second material now, and then I can just go loop. I shouldn't have chosen red, should I? Because that's the selection mode colour for wings. And I'll select the faces on the bottom half and then go assign to that selection. And then I need another material. So I'll take this material and I'll duplicate it. So I've now got that duplicate material there. And I'm going to make that internal and then make it external again. And then I'll have another copy, you see. So I've got this new material and save that. And then I'll go back into my paint package and pick up that copy material there. And I'll just do, I think I want to invert here, make it very quickly, a different thing, and save that. Then go back into Wings 3D. And then if I refresh that, you can see that it's not had the effect that you might have anticipated. You might have thought when I copied that and copied that, it would automatically have made this copy apply to that material. But this map is the one associated with that material because I duplicated that and that was the case. To get this applied to the new material, I need to drag and drop it over and select diffuse, and there you go. You get the expected result. So that fooled me quite a few times. The other thing that caught me out is when you've got your outliner filled with materials and textures, suddenly you can't get one from the bottom and drag it all the way to the top to drop it on. So if I wanted to swap these over, well, that's easy enough. I'll drop that over the top and go diffuse, drop that over the top. So I get this bottom one, drop it over the other texture and go diffuse. I'll swap them around. Fair enough. But if the list gets very long, I can't do that. So there is another way of doing that. It's worth knowing, I discovered. So if you right click on this and you pick up the image, then you can left click on the object to select it, the material, select it, and then drop picked up object and select diffuse. And so do this again, pick up the other image, select that, right click, and then drop pick up to object, select diffuse, and you can swap them around that way. So that's the alternative to just dragging and dropping the textures over the materials. Now the last point I want to make before I move on to the next shape, we'll do a cylinder next and find something about that, is that the UV map information is associated with the object's geometry. It is not to do with the material and the textures. The material and the textures use the UV information, but the UV information is in the object. So if you duplicate your object, so we'll just duplicate this object along the y-axis, you get a full set of UV information. So you can create more textures, you could create a new map for that. So you've got these two objects there. Now, I suppose the last thing I could point out is, supposing, right, I have a rethink and I think, well, I've got these and I want to create another set, a different arrangement of UV maps so they're all on one UV map for these two objects. You can do that if you select both of these together and then combine them. This is the easiest way to do it. We'll come to other ways later on, I'm sure. Right, so they're all combined as one object. I can go right click and then go left click on UV mapping, and then I've got these four, but they're all overlapping. So what I can now do is scale and uniform. So I could scale it down, I say 50%, and then I can separate. If I get hold of the individual, press space to deselect, I can this should all be separate now. Yes, they are. It's just getting hold of them. It's a little bit fiddly. There's two. Okay, this is something worth knowing. There's two ways in which this mode works when you're selecting the body. If you've just pressed space and go to body mode, you can drag separate parts apart and they won't stay selected. However, if you select two things like this, when you select a third thing, it doesn't deselect itself. You're now in a sort of different operation. So now it's selecting more and more. So once you've selected more things, but whenever it's just one thing you're working with, you can move it around the UV map quite easily. So you've got these options in here to move to that you can use it to position things. So if I said top there, so we could move those both to the top. Move to top, and then I could deselect and select these two and move. Oops, I did that wrong, didn't I? Move to the bottom and then select this one and this one and move to the right. I'm just being tidy here to show you how you could do it with efficient use of space without them overlapping, and then move to the left. And now I want a template that's going to be for these, so I go right click, create texture, and just check that I'm on color white and go OK, and then close that. So this has created another texture here, so I'll just rename this one for together. Bearing in mind we've done the UV map and it's associated with the geometry, not the textures, so I just need to work out which material we've got. So we'll select that material, that's just for the top half, but I want the whole lot together, so I'll just assign all of those to that material, then pick my texture up and drop it on there and say diffuse. I can now get rid of this material. You can't get rid of a texture that's associated with a material. So if I try to delete this one, it'll say it's been used by material. Because I got rid of this, the association there, I should be able to delete that one with a warning. So if I delete this other material here, just tidying up, I can now delete this texture that's not being used, and I've got my four together, which I shall make external. And so I'll just save that as a JPEG. OK. I'll go into my paint shop here and bring those in, and then I can colour. I'll only do one bit because I can see that I've overrun once again. I apologise. So I'll just colour these bits and we'll see where these end up. And you should see that we've got four separate ones. So just go File and Save. Go it back into Wings, and I'll refresh this now. And you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 all together on these two objects. At this point you can now separate those out if you want to, so select the entire thing separate, but they're still linked together with these materials. There are other behaviours, which I've gone on too long, so we'll cover this in another video. When you save as an object with split objects but with linked materials, the materials will end up getting duplicated, so it's a way of splitting off duplicates of material maps. But I'm getting too involved now, and I apologise for that. So anyway, that's the end of part 3. Part 4, we'll move on to a cylinder and find something to do with that, and trust me, there's still plenty to do in UV mapping. Cheers now.